Hi, and welcome to the Quick and Dirty Romance Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Skye McDonald, author of the Anti-Belle series, including the newly released Just Your Type.
And I'm Sarah Smith, author of Faker, If You Never Come Back, Simmer Down, On Location, The Close-Up, In Love with Louis Prescott, The Boy at the Bookstore, and Dessert, Flirt, Repeat.
And together we are Sarah Skye, author of the best-selling Sips and Strokes, Vibes and Feels, and Whiskers and Sunshine.
Each episode will dive deep into what it's like to be a contemporary romance author. We'll talk writing inspiration, give you the inside scoop about the publishing world, chat about how we write those infamous sex scenes, and more. And then we'll pull out and wrap it up in 30 minutes or less, but we promise to leave you satisfied.
So if you haven't already read our books, be sure to check them out after you listen to this podcast. And please do DM us with any questions or requests for future episodes that you may have.
So we want to start today's episode by saying that these are personal preferences and opinions only, of course. We respect and love how broad our genre is, and we want people to read and write what they enjoy. But today we're talking about hard limits when it comes to tropes.
That's right, because everyone should know what their hard limits are when it comes to tropes and everything else. One of my hard limits is olives. Don't put them near me. But no, today we're talking about writing and the things that we will write, the things that we haven't yet written. But really what we're talking about today are the hard limits and what we stay firmly away from in terms of tropes. And again, it's no disrespect to anybody, but we wanted to talk about the things you won't see from Sarah or me and why that is. So let's dive in. Sarah, what tropes won't we touch? Why not start with one? Throw one out.
Okay. Well, first I want to say this is why we work well together, Skye, because I really like olives. So you don't like olives and I like olives. So.
It's a great relationship.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So for me, one of the tropes that I don't personally like to write or read because it just weirds me out. And again, no offense to anybody, is mafia romance. Right. And admittedly, I don't read a lot of, and I haven't read a lot of mafia romance, but I think for me, it's just the fact that it's typically part of like the dark romance genre where there's a lot of like, just a lot of heavy, very heavy things happening, a lot of violence. Mm-hmm. A couple that I have like read the synopsis of, it's like, and not all of them are like this. Obviously, each author does their own twist on the trope. But a couple of them are like the daughter of somebody who owes like a debt, so he like sells his daughter to like to the mafia, which and it like ends up fine in the story and ends up fine. But like just something about that is like really upsetting to me as a person, and I cannot totally understand like if you want like escapism and if like one of the great things about romance is the genre has its like very predictable arc and plot points. You know it's all going to be okay in the end, and that's great and that's what I love about it. But like there's just something really heavy about that I can't handle. I don't know. Do you read a lot of mafia romance? Am I missing out?
I do not. I do not read a lot of mafia romance. I will say as a teenager and young adult, I loved mafia movies. Not romantic movies, but like The Godfather. Oh my gosh, that was my jam when I was in high school. I have moved away from like a lot of violence in my shows and fiction and real life. That was never really a thing, but I find as I've gotten older, I've moved away from sort of finding violence as appealing. But I certainly do understand like being about 20 years old and finding like the romanticization of violence very fun. Like I had no problem with Pulp Fiction. And again, these are not romances, so I'm going somewhere with this, but the like ultra violence of that, to borrow a term from a film, I found it just fun and cool. It was cool, right? I didn't get confused that that's how I wanted to live my life, but it was cool and it was sexy. So I can totally see how adding in actual sex and love to a mafia, I mean, it's a great combination if that's very appealing to you. And indeed, as a very, like in my early 20s, it would have been appealing to me. Now it is not so much. I don't know where that turned or why, but I'm not as drawn to watching a lot of violence and reading about it. So it's not very appealing to me. That said, I can still get into a good action movie. I really can. And like, I know it, but just overall, it's not as palatable. So, dark romance, it's an interesting term. It encompasses so much. And then even mafia romances do encompass a lot. So there is a lot of like Stockholm syndrome that I'm not really a fan of. Although I guess if I look at it in a different way, it's basically the modern day damsel in distress. No, like
yeah, I can see that.
yeah. I mean, I can definitely see it that way, but I don't write damsels in distress. And I'm sure that, many of the women are actually strong, but in a very crap situation, and they have to figure out, like, there are many ways, as you just said, that we can do it. But I do not have a plan for mafia romance, but if I did, it would definitely have some sort of spin on it. Because yeah, the like being sold or something like that, while it is an excellent fantasy, right? Like you said, I mean, that's part of our genre. It's all fantasy, all different types of fantasy. I would not feel like I was giving voice to a character that I understood very well if that was what I was working with. So yeah, for sure. Good point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, at least. So what is what's a trope that what's one trope that you don't ever want to read or write?
Okay. So there are ways that this can be done as a story that I would read, but you will not find me writing a teacher-student romance. And for those of you who have ever heard me speak, you probably know that I was a teacher for a long time. And I was a teacher at a school who unfortunately had quite a few inappropriate allegations and scandals between teachers and students. Yeah, to the point where we had to undergo so much like workshopping around never do this, never do that, like things that in other schools I had worked in, because of the community element, um, like sometimes we looked after the kids in like almost like a parental way. Like the assistant principal would organize things for the kids, things that at the school that I later worked at would have been like hugely no, simply because of the unfortunate things that had happened. So I really didn't like the way that played out. And I mean, it's not the school's fault. Like they had to cover themselves. But to me, the dynamic of a student and a teacher is a mentor, right? And so when a student becomes involved, and again, college student, they're sexy, TA, like that's cool, like I get it. Or like mistaken identity, and then you feel like there's a way in which two consenting adults are going about a relationship, and one of them happens to have a job title that puts them as a teacher. Okay. But for the most part, I find the teacher-student relationship to be a mentor-mentee, and I find romantic involvement in that to be a form of manipulation. And so I'm not comfortable with it, even though, again, I know it can be done and done super like well and not at all creepy. It's just from my lived experience, I wouldn't go near that trope.
I mean, that makes sense because I feel like you said, there's a manipulation that could and does happen like in real life situations of this. And anytime, at least for me, we're dealing with a power dynamic that isn't equal, that really just gives me the creeps. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like anytime where there's like where one of the characters, typically the student, obviously, because I don't know how it would work otherwise, is like not of age, or like is just barely legal, like that really, like I just can't. And not saying that like teacher student romances are all like that, because they're not. No. But like just that's what that makes me think of, and I just can't, like I can't get past that, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with that. Yeah, for sure. All right, you got another one?
I do. I have a lot, actually. Okay. This one, there's not anything wrong with this one. I just don't personally don't really like it. I don't like insta love. And I want to like make a clarification, because I love insta connection,
Yeah.
Like I love, and which I think most romances and rom-coms have, at least the ones that I've read in the last handful of years, like obviously like in the meet cute something happens to trigger their like attraction for each other, whether or not the characters like each other or hate each other, depending on what kind of trope it is. But like there's just something about insta love where like the two characters do, they just seem like they're in love right off the bat. I really don't like that. And I don't even know, I couldn't even tell you like why exactly. It's just doesn't, I think it's probably because it doesn't, for me, I don't personally believe in love at first sight when it comes to like romantic partner.
Okay.
Not to say that like if another or other people like believe in love at first sight and have experienced it, that's awesome. But for me, I could never, just because to me love is like taking care of your partner when they're sick, or like sticking through a really hard emotional or trying time together and not giving up on each other, like going through hard things.
Yeah.
When it's not like love and bliss and sexiness and sex all the time, like it's the hard crap that you go through. That's love to me. And I don't think you can feel that instantly for somebody. I do think you can feel attraction and connection though.
100%.
And I'm all about insta connection and insta attraction. Just I can't do insta love. I just instantly I'm like, you know what? This isn't for me.
Yeah, and I don't read a lot of those, but I know what you mean. It's like the idea that as soon as the two MCs meet, it's just done. Of course they're in love, right? Like, I think you have to learn about somebody to like really go to that next level. That's an interesting one. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, it wouldn't occur to me to write two people like meeting, so like, hello, okay, we're done, right? Like, of course, then the story becomes centered around not them getting to know each other or learning to love each other, but more like what they go through together. But I have seen that, like this idea of like, well, but no, of course they're in love now because they've met, and yeah, I wouldn't build it that way too. I tend to build either like they've known each other a long time, or when they first meet, there's like chemistry, but it's not love. Like it's like, this person's interesting. So yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can actually think of an author who I get, and it depends on probably how you as a reader take it when you read it. But Tessa Bailey does a lot of what could be classified as insta love, but I don't technically, like me, I don't take it as insta love. I take it more as like insta attraction or insta connection.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on who you ask and what they consider like, oh, that actually was them falling for each other, the first meeting. And then other people are like, no, it's more like they just had a really strong connection and then they fell for each other in like a week or something, a short timeline, which again isn't the most realistic thing in the world, but I can totally buy that. If it's insta connection or insta attraction, I could totally buy that. It's just insta love I have a hard time with. I don't know why. Again, it's just
interesting.
It's just me and my weirdness, I guess.
No, again, like the whole point of this is not that we have some sort of answer. It's just our own perspective. And I would love to hear from people who have very different perspectives, right? Like, so for me, one thing that I don't envision myself ever writing is monster romances. And, many times it's done really well. Like it's a huge part of the PNR, paranormal all over the place. Paranormal in general, I don't see myself writing. And yet it is a hugely popular trope right now. And like I said, I mean, there's nothing that's like, oh, this is why it's bad. It's not bad. It's great. All of these tropes are great because they make up this beautiful mosaic of a genre. But like, I just don't have a story where somebody falls in love with a Superman. Like it doesn't like occur to me as a story I may write. So like, I don't foresee, like, I don't know. It's just not. I heard a really interesting reading at when I was at Love and Devotion BookCon. The woman read a whole scene about, it was a spanking scene with a kraken. So like tentacles, like, she first of all, she read it really well. And second of all, it worked because of the way she built it. I can't remember kraken. I don't know. I'll try to put it in the show notes, but for everybody who's listening and like, no, give me that book. Like, respect, girl, respect, or man, or anything else. But yeah, so people love monster romances, and it just doesn't occur to me how that storyline would play out in my mind, you know?
No, exactly. Yeah, it's hard to want to write a trope that you personally aren't excited about or you don't relate to in a way.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, I okay, this might be very sad to some people, but hey, it's me. I just like found out what a kraken was like
Oh,
a couple years ago because I don't like I don't know. Again, I don't delve in that genre and I don't even really know what it's like a sea monster, right?
sea monster. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then I and then I found out not that long ago because I don't pay attention to sports, guys, which is not a surprise to anyone
Oh,
who knows me, that there's a hockey team
yeah.
that's their I think that's their mascot, right?
Seattle Kraken, right? They're
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
newish team.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So this is all just new stuff to me. I don't yeah.
So I will tell you that many and many years ago, I used to teach middle school, as you know, and one of the things I would do a Greek mythology unit, and I would show, for those of you listening who know, you know, I would show the old movie, The Clash of the Titans. I don't mean the redone one because they redid it within the last 10 years. I'm talking about like the 1980s, like stop motion, claymation, Clash of the Titans, but it had a Kraken in it. And it wasn't a sexy Kraken, it was just a Kraken. So I've known about Krakens for a long time for that reason. Plus, I watched Pirates of the Caribbean. So yes, it is a sea monster like known for sinking ships and, you know, just generally terrorizing the seas. But yeah, Seattle's hockey team is named after that. So yeah,
Okay.
the more you know, the more you know.
Yeah, I just didn't like I don't know, like I've heard people say like in the past, like, oh, release the Kraken. I'm like, what the
Yeah.
hell does that even mean? And then I just wouldn't think about it because
Well,
I don't
I learned within the last couple of months what a Jacob's ladder is when it has to do with piercings. So
oh
the
yeah.
more I know,
Okay.
I'm not
No,
telling you to look it up.
yeah, we're not gonna go into that in this episode, guys. Sorry.
It's another episode. That's another hard limits episode. No, but
Yeah.
yeah, so monster romance is not a thing I'd see. Although, you know, our friend Steph Simpson writes it great. I love it. She's always putting together like really interesting and like things that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'd read that. But then when I read hers, I'm like, oh no, this was great. So
Mhm.
absolutely love it. Any others that spring to mind? We've kind of hit some pretty big ones.
Um, I don't like Secret Baby.
Oh,
Really don't like Secret Baby, which is maybe interesting because I love like in an epilogue or a bonus epilogue when one of the characters gets or when the one of the main characters gets pregnant. I love that. Like it just makes it like extra happily ever after like happiness. But Secret Baby, I just don't. I really don't like it because I don't like the thought of like the female main character like having to bear the emotional burden and physical burden
yeah.
too of a baby and the other character doesn't have to deal with that. I mean,
Mm,
for whatever reason, like there's always, a good plot and story that explains why the characters do what they do in a Secret Baby trope romance. But for me personally, it just hits too close to home, I guess, because then I think of all like the single moms that I've known in my life and like
yeah.
all the deadbeat dads and stuff. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be painting things, complicated issues with the same brush, but like it just like I don't know, it just makes
No,
me like it just bums me out, and I don't like that.
but I can offer like the other side of that coin as well, because I think your point is exactly. I mean, it's great. Like, you know, I'm not a mother. I'm not a mother, but I have, you know, known many people who have gone through pregnancy. I've, you know, single motherhood is very difficult, even when you have a great support system. Like it's always a lot. But even with a two-parent home, a baby's a freaking lot of work.
Yeah.
So there's that part. To me, from the other side of the point of view, I think it's unfair to deny the information to somebody that they have an offspring in the world, right? Like for whatever reason is set up. I get it. And again, people do it really well. It can be really compelling. But like to my mindset on this, if somebody like comes up to you 5 years later and like, oh, here's your child, you missed that in child's entire, like you didn't, like the male, like the father didn't have the opportunity to say, I want to be in this child's life. So like a secret, like keeping that information from somebody, a father should step up and provide, but should also have the right to know that they have a being, they've created a person, right?
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
No, I totally agree with that. Yeah, that is the other side of that, obviously. It's just like a super complicated like
It
real
is.
life issue, and I hate like I don't want to read about it in my fun
Yeah.
romance times, you know?
Will you write a child into the main part of a story? Would you do that?
I would do that. I haven't yet, other
Mhm.
than like I said, like happy bonus epilogues, which are just like a chapter long.
Right.
But I don't know, because again, like I don't have kids and I don't have experience with that, and I don't know if I would do a very good job. I'm actually thinking about maybe doing that at like a single parent romance or something like that. I think that could be fun.
Yeah.
I haven't like attempted it because
Well, I will
I'm
tell
scared.
you, I have 2 books on pre-order for 2024, and one of them may have a single parent trope in it.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Maybe.
Okay. Okay, so that makes me okay. So I have like a question just popped in my head that I think could be interesting for us to answer.
Okay.
If you don't mind. What is the trope that you thought you would never write that you did end up writing? Do you have that?
Ooh,
You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I bet I know your answer.
Yeah.
Um, whew, I don't know if I've gotten there yet. I don't know
Really?
if I've
Okay.
gone over my hard limits. Well, I want to say that Just Your Type is getting close because I never really thought I would write any kind of like BDSM. And while
Mhm.
Just Your Type is not erotica and it is not BDSM, it does feature a little bit of a DS relationship, a little bit. Like when I say that, I want to be clear, it's just like just a little taste, just a little taste. But that said, I mean, I guess that's the closest thing. And even then, that is not a like fully developed BDSM relationship. It is not, right? Like, so I guess it's the closest I've come to that. Um, yeah.
No, I think that that's a good answer for you because I agree. Like it is not. I
Yeah.
and I read the book. It's awesome. It's
Thank
amazing. People should read it. But yeah, like if you're like, oh God, I really want some BDSM erotica,
you.
give me Just Your Type. No, don't do
No,
that.
no.
But it does explore elements of that
Yeah.
in a great fun way in the context of a romance.
Yeah, just a very like light exploration of dominance, right? And but
Yeah.
even then, like you're not seeing the full development of a DS relationship. And I want to stress that that is true because, you know, I think that's a thing that like sometimes we can get cavalier about in romance. Like DS relationships are very important and the boundaries of them need to be defined. So like this is an example of a touch into without it going all the way. And you know, there are certain books that depict it inaccurately. And then there are books that depict it very accurately, but I want to be clear that like this is a light touch, right? So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's good to make note of. Okay, so for me, I never thought I would write a sports romance because one, I don't like sports. Personally, I don't have anything against them. I just personally don't enjoy playing, watching, being around them. Don't really care about them, which it's probably not all that surprising if you know me at all. Um, but I ended up writing a steamy hockey romance
Yep.
that is coming out pretty soon.
Yeah.
Um, and I did that because hockey romance just kind of blew up in the past couple years, and I'm like, you know what? Let's see if I can ride this wave. Let's see if I can learn just enough about hockey to write a CV romance about it. And I think I did. Again, this isn't like some sports case study about hockey. If that's what you want, that's not what this is. But he plays hockey in it because he's a hockey player.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of like, I never thought I would do a sports romance, but I did it, and I had a one, like, I really enjoyed writing it. I think it's probably one of the better books that I've ever written, honestly. And not because of hockey necessarily,
Right.
but I think just because I've lost track of what number book this is. And just, you know, like, just as the more you do something, the better you get at it, obviously. So I just think it's a better book than like my first book was.
Well, that's so interesting that you say that, because I too have a hockey romance coming. However, I wrote this hockey romance some time ago. So, and I do have a deep love of sports. And I was going to say to you off camera, but I'll say it on. I think our next episode should be about hockey romance.
I think so too. I think that would be great. I think I just think it's a really like hot trope right now that's having its moment.
It is.
In a lot of ways, good and bad. We can get into that in our, our discussion.
We go face first into hockey on our next episode.
That's a great idea.
I love it. But in the meantime, that was good for me. Was it good for you, Sarah?
Hell yeah, it was good for me.
Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you have been entertained by our hard limits on tropes. If you like what you hear, please do leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen. If you haven't already read our books, they are Sips and Strokes, Vibes and Feels, and Whiskers and Sunshine by Sarah Skye, The Not So Nice Girl, Not Suitable for Work, Off the Record, Nemesis, and Just Your Type by Skye McDonald, and Faker, Simmer Down If You Never Come Back, On Location, The Close-Up, In Love with Louis Prescott, The Boy with a Bookstore, and Dessert Flirt Repeat by the prolific Sarah Smith. You can find us on Instagram. We are at author Sarah Skye, and I am on Instagram at writer Skye McD.
And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at author Sarah S. We love to hear from you, so reach out and DM us with any questions or requests for future episodes.
Thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.